want to give a quick shout out to all my patrons. Thank you so much for all of the continued support. Hey everybody, as we wrap up 2023, I'm going through a series of videos where I'm going through some top 10 lists, and today we're going to be going over my top 10 most disappointing books that I read in 2023. Now, this is not the top 10 worst books that I read in 2023. We'll be talking about that later when I do a ranking of every single book that I read, which will be a very long video since I read well over 100 books. But the ones that I kind of had some promise for, or I felt like there should have been some hope there that I'd like it, and it ended up disappointing me in ways that I could not imagine. So let's kick this off with number 10, and it is The Way of Shadows. This is book 1 of Night Angel by Brent Weeks. I ended up giving this a 1-star DNF. It's just not what I had come to expect from Brent Weeks, the author of the Lightbringer series. And I liked Lightbringer quite a bit, more than most people. I even didn't mind the ending, which most people thought was atrocious. So going into this, I had this hope that Brent Weeks was going to be able to deliver on what he was able to give me, that amazing series to keep it going. But the characters in this story for me just had no soul, and it felt way more YA than his other works that I read, and the plot just never drew me in. I wanted this story of like this assassin or this like thief, and I mean that's what like the cover evoked. That's what I got out of the name of it. And even though we got a little bit of that, it just felt so flat. And I just can't understand how this is possibly the same author that I had come to love in his other series. So number 9 is Bookshops and Bone Dust. This is the prequel to Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. Ended up giving this 2 stars. You know, I liked the first book. I think I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, maybe even 4.5. And it just hit all the right spots for me. And, you know, I think maybe I read it at the perfect time. I think I was reading some kind of massive stories, some darker stories, and it just had this lightness to it and what I really needed at the time. And even though I got this out of this book, a really light read and easy and just a feel-good kind of book, it just didn't work. I mean, it took all of the soul from the first book for me and just kind of got rid of all the things that made it addicting and fun. I mean, in the first book, you had this, building up a coffee shop. And in this one, you don't get building up anything. You just get this character who you already know the fate of, since it's a prequel story. It doesn't really know what it wants to be. It's like some action in part of it, quite a bit of action, actually. Some like recovering and convalescence in this bookshop. And, you know, I already like books. I don't need to read more about somebody liking books. I already know that I like books. And so it didn't have that hook that I really wanted out of this. And I felt like it just, took the soul out of it. Number 8 is The Book That Wouldn't Burn. This is book 1 of the Library Trilogy by Mark Lawrence. I gave this one a 1 star, sadly. I just want so badly to like Mark Lawrence. I like Mark Lawrence as a person a lot. And I just so badly want that to translate into me liking his books. But this is now the 4th book of his that I've read. And it's got to be the last one, right? Because I haven't really ever loved any of them. And this one was the worst of the bunch for me. I mean, I could tell when reading it that it's probably going to end up being his most popular book. And it's probably the most well-written book. But the way that it's written just doesn't work for Matt. It's not a book for me. It's got this kind of bizarre uncovering of this mystery, and everything feels kind of dreamlike, and you don't know what's real and what's not real. And, when I have these complaints about certain books, I get people saying like, oh, that's what I loved about it. And I read on like Reddit and these other places that are like people trying to convince people to read certain books. This is praised in all the, not just this book, but that style of writing. And when I kind of hear those kind of words, I'm just immediately turned off. And for a whole book like this, it made me nope out real quick. Number 7 on this list is The First Binding. This is book 1 of the Tales of Tremaine series by 𝗟𝗏. I gave this one a 0 stars. I've never given a 0 stars before. Not so much because I hated it, I did, but because it's plagiarized. It's just a ripoff of The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. More than a lot. Like, entirely a ripoff with some character name differences and some slight scene differences. Slight. I've never seen a book that was so much of a ripoff. In fact, if I tried to rewrite The Name of the Wind, I don't know that I would be as similar as this one was to The Name of the Wind. I just hated everything about it. Now, I didn't go into this thinking I was going to love it, but I think I predicted 4 stars. And so it just, oh man, I don't understand what people like about this. I didn't know anything about the author beforehand. I just know there was some promise for this book. I think 𝗃𝗃 might have been like, this book's awesome. And I love 𝗃𝗃. I don't always agree with his recommendations on books, which is normal. I don't necessarily agree with a lot of other booktubers. Maybe you don't agree with me very much, but yeah, this one just fell so much beyond flat that it felt like I was reading something that would eventually turn into a lawsuit. Number 6 is Age of Assassins, Book 1 of the Wounded Kingdom by R.J. Barker. I gave this 2 stars, and, I gave it 2 stars. Most of the things on this list are going to be 1 star or clearly below with the 0 stars. But I just love R.J. Barker so much. I still do. The 𝗏𝗏𝐿𝐷 trilogy is one of my favorite trilogies of all time. I give all 3 of those books 5 out of 5 stars, which is crazy rare for me. I can only say that about, 2 or 3 series that I've ever read, and I've read tons of trilogies. And The Gods of the Weirdwood, his most recent book in the 𝗓𝗁𝐾𝐧𝐿 series, I think it's called, the 𝗓𝗁𝐾𝐧𝐿 trilogy, was wonderful. It was one of my favorite books that I read this year. And so to go back and to read The Wounded Kingdom, I was like, okay, this is gonna be awesome. I love R.J. Barker. I love everything he's doing. And then it just got dull from the start and went dull as it went along. It ends up being this kind of mystery novel. I very rarely love those, but it was so slow. It didn't have any of these epic heights. I didn't fall in love with any of these characters. Again, it felt like I was reading a book by an entirely different author. And I get that authors can grow over time. This was R.J. Barker's first published works, I believe. And so, yeah, clearly he's gotten a lot better as a writer, or at least a writer that I can enjoy a lot more, because yeah, this one was a big swing and a miss. And I understand a little bit more that there's a reason that, 𝗏𝗏𝐿𝐷 is so much more popular than The Wounded Kingdom. And I think it's for a lot of the same reasons that I think it's that way. Number 5 is The Drawing of the Three. This is book 2 of The Dark Tower by Stephen King. I ended up giving this 2 stars. This was another one where I just want so badly to like Stephen King. Not so much because I like Stephen King as a person. I don't really know him as a person. But because everyone says he's amazing and he's so popular that clearly I'm missing something. And I keep looking for that spark. And, I read The Stand, didn't love it. I read the one about the Kennedy assassination, didn't love it. I read The Gunslinger, totally didn't like it. But then people kept telling me, look, Matt, this is his, fantasy magnum opus. The first book is weird, but the second book is just incredible. That's where people fall in love with it. So I went into this going, yeah, I didn't like the first one, but man, I'm going to love this next one. I'm finally going to get Stephen King. And I think it was like the book that I disliked the most out of Stephen King. It was trash to me. There's probably some merit here somewhere. Clearly, people love it. It's very popular, but it's just a mess. I mean, Stephen King as an author is a mess. And I get that he's like this mess that people like because that's his writing style, where he just kind of rambles and he's just all about character and character and character. And he writes and writes and writes, throws it all up against the wall. And then he tries to, figure out the ending at the end. Yeah. That doesn't work, especially on a longer series where you need to have some cohesive narrative going on. You need to plan out your books, and that clearly didn't happen with this one. Number 4 is Nevernight. This is book 1 of the Nevernight Chronicle by Jay Kristoff. I give it 1 star. This is a common theme in this, but I loved Empire the Vampire, the first book that I read of his, which is the most recent book that he's written. And it blew me out of the water. I love this vampire story. The way it's written is so beautiful. I love the writing style. The plot just works so well. I've read a lot of stuff with the vampires in it. This is by far the best. Absolutely terrifying. Not so much like a horror book, but the vampires actually felt, legitimately strong and scary and emotional depth to it. It had this great framing narrative in it. But then Nevernight Chronicle was horrific. I mean, it was definitely one of the worst books that I read this year. The writing was absolutely atrocious, truly atrocious. He wrote women horrifically. I mean, the level of smut here is just ridiculous, especially for a male author. It just comes off very, very cringeworthy. There's these horrible turns of phrase constantly, just adjective after adjective, huge amounts of info dumps. But worst of all, most of the book is just horrifyingly boring. There's so much telling and almost no showing. And I just was like, how is this possibly the same author? I don't get it. But it has not taken me away from Jay Kristoff, the author. I can't wait to read Empire of the Damned, I think is the next book that's coming out early in 2024. I can't wait to read it. And I just hope it's more like Empire of the Vampire than it is like Nevernight. So number 3 is The Dragonbone Chair. This is book 1 of Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn by Tad Williams. I give it 1 star. I couldn't finish it. I read about 60% of the way through. And I mean, this is common for most of the books I read, but God, I want to like Tad Williams for so many reasons. One is so many authors that I love cite Tad Williams as an inspiration to them. And that's special. I want to find the things to love out of this, like my favorite authors have found to love in him themselves. I also want to love older fantasy works. I realize this bias. I don't really understand what it is or why it is, but I love newer fantasy stories. And older fantasy stories, I find myself having a lot of problems with them, and I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be, newer is always better, but I kind of feel that way, and I don't want to. And so I went into this one going, I'm going to love this thing. I'm going to love this thing. And I kept reading it, being like, when am I going to love this thing? And it's huge. I mean, it's an absolutely enormous book. And there was one moment, finally, like 150 or so pages in, where I'm like, this is exciting. And then it was exciting for like 2 pages, and then we went back to dull. And then there was this journey, this very long journey, that nothing happened. And eventually I just had to stop. It's like, I don't have that much time to read these huge, doorstopper books to try to find something that I like about it thousands of pages into this thing. I don't have time for that. Maybe I'll go back to it. But right now, I can't do it, and I'm just really sad about it. Number 2 is Blood Meridian. This is a standalone by Cormac McCarthy. I gave it a 1 star. I felt really bad about giving this a 1 star when I did it, but since then, I'm really happy I gave it a 1 star. Screw that book, and screw the people that loved this thing obsessively. And if that's you, then, not screw you directly, but, I read this book. I thought it was going to be something that it wasn't. My bad. That's how I go into books. I don't research them beforehand. I like that. I like to be surprised. But I thought it was going to be this fun story that was an adventure tale. And what I got was this, supposedly literary masterpiece where you're supposed to like piece together every little sentence and ooze in the way that one word is written and, just appreciate all the little themes on every page that's different than the other page. And it's a chore. It's a bore. Is there anything that rhymes with or that I could say? Like, I wanted to throw this book out the door. I don't know. I hated it. And it just, there's so many things I hated about it. But the reason I say screw the people that love this thing, because I did my review. I hated it. I was very honest about my hate for it. And then I got people literally give me death threats in the YouTube comments. Like a lot of them. And it's crazy. I called out the people that liked it. It's kind of pretentious. And then all I saw from the comments were people acting pretentious and then some. So I feel very solidified in my view about this book. And eventually I had to turn off the comments because it was like getting kind of scary on how vitriolic people were about my hate for this book and the hate they had for me and the bad things they want to happen to me because I dislike this book, which is bizarre to me. But I need to stick to fantasy because apparently fantasy fans are a lot more chill than literary fiction fans because they're crazy. Then we get to my number 1 book on this list, and it's Waybound. This is book 12 of Cradle by Will White. This is the final book in the series, and I gave it 2 stars. So why is the number 1 book on my list 2 stars when I gave so many 1 stars, even a 0 star? It's because this is the 12th book of the series. I finally, it's done. The series is done, and I love this series. It's still one of my favorite series. But this is the book that I hated the most. And so for a series that I love, to flub the ending that badly, now obviously this is a subjective opinion. A lot of people love this ending. Most people love this ending as I read reviews of this. I feel like I'm a little bit on an island in terms of somebody that didn't like it, although I have had people reach out that said they also hated it. Or really didn't like it, and I hate it. It just left me severely disappointed that I spent so much time getting invested in the story for an ending that just didn't work. So many things I hated about the way that this final book went down. In fact, I didn't really like book 11 either, and it made me so weary going into this one. Like, ugh, is it going to be able to pull it through? I don't think it is. And when it didn't, and then some, just uber disappointment. So those are my 10. What was disappointing to you this year? What did you read that you were looking forward to and it just failed? I want to know. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, happy reading to you. Thanks again to all my patrons, with a special shout out to my Ascendant tier and Librarian tier patrons: Anna G, CJ, Doust, Darren, Gregory, Jonathan, Nathan T, Nev's Book Channel, Orthodoxia, Ron Reich, Russell, Ryan L, Sydney Baker, Tay C, Tahir, Anna, Andra, Blair, Brock, Evan, Fanixan, Harry B, Joe, Cat Mick, Michael Sugarman, Sky, TW57, Wacky, and Zion. Thanks for sticking to the end of this video, and if you want to watch some more content from my channel, click over here and I've got some good videos for you. Thanks so much.